All right, so today we're diving into some pretty important stuff for all you Texas business owners out there. We're talking Texas Payday Law. And to help us break it all down, we've got a super insightful article from the Unit Consulting. Now, they're like HR gurus. Specifically, they focus on helping small and mid-sized businesses in Texas.
Yeah, you know those businesses. The ones that might not have a whole HR department, but still got to navigate all those tricky employment laws. It's a lot.
Right, exactly. And that's why I'm so glad we're talking about this, because this stuff can get complicated fast. So the article really stresses this idea that Texas Payday Law is all about making sure employees get paid on time, and that if something goes wrong, there's a clear process in place to fix it.
Exactly. And it's not just about protecting employees, it's about protecting employers too. Because believe me, if you're not following the law, you could be facing some serious legal trouble.
Okay, so let's break it down a little. What are some of the key things employers need to know?
Well, for starters, there's the frequency of paychecks. You know, how often you have to pay your employees.
All right, so that's different for different types of employees, right?
Exactly. If you've got exempt employees, those are the folks who are not eligible for overtime pay. You got to pay them at least once a month.
Okay, so that makes sense.
But for non-exempt employees, the ones who do qualify for overtime, you have to pay them at least twice a month.
So that's where it gets a little trickier. Why the difference, though?
Well, think about it this way. Exempt employees usually have a set salary, so paying them once a month is pretty standard.
Right.
But non-exempt employees, they're often paid hourly, so more frequent paychecks protect them. Especially if they're working a lot of overtime, it ensures they're being compensated fairly for all those extra hours.
Gotcha, that makes sense. So what about when an employee leaves the company? Whether they're let go or they resign?
Yeah, that's a big one. There are some strict deadlines for those final paychecks.
Okay, so tell me more about that.
If you discharge an employee, you only have 6 days to get that final paycheck to them.
6 days? Wow, that's pretty tight.
It is. But if they resign, you have a little more breathing room. You can pay them on the next regular payday.
Okay, that's a bit more manageable.
But either way, that final paycheck needs to be accurate. All outstanding wages, accrued vacation time, the whole shebang.
I bet this is where those meticulous records come in handy. The article mentioned that Texas law requires employers to keep those records for at least 3 years.
Oh, absolutely. It might seem like a hassle, but trust me, it's crucial. Imagine an employee files a wage claim 2 years down the line. Having those organized records could save you a lot of headaches.
Oh, I can only imagine.
It can literally be the difference between a quick resolution and a drawn-out legal battle.
That's a great point. And speaking of wage claims, the article said employees have 180 days to file one with the Texas Workforce Commission. What exactly happens during that process?
Well, the TWC basically steps in as the referee. They investigate, they interview both sides, and they'll definitely be looking at those payroll records. So you want to make sure they're squeaky clean.
So if the TWC finds that an employer hasn't been following the law,
Things can get pretty expensive. You're looking at back pay, fines, and even penalties if you're a repeat offender.
so the stakes are pretty high. All right, we've covered the basics here, but I know Texas payday law gets even more interesting. When we look at specific industries, the article dives into construction and hospitality, two massive industries in Texas.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So what are some of the things employers in those sectors need to be extra aware of?
Well, let's start with construction. In that industry, you're typically looking at weekly pay, not bi-weekly or monthly like a lot of other industries.
Ah, interesting.
It just makes sense when you think about the nature of the work. It ensures workers are getting paid consistently, which is important for their financial stability.
Right, I can see that. And what about if you're a construction company working on a public or government project?
Oh, then things get even more specific. You have to factor in something called prevailing wage rates.
Prevailing wage rates, what are those?
They're basically minimum wage requirements set by either the TWC or the Federal Department of Labor to make sure workers on those projects are being paid fairly.
So that adds another layer of complexity.
It does. And failing to comply with those prevailing wage rates can really cost you. We're talking fines, being barred from future projects, even legal action.
Yikes. All right, so construction definitely has its own set of rules. What about hospitality? I know that industry has its own unique challenges, especially when it comes to tipped employees.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So in Texas, the base rate for tipped employees is $2.13 an hour.
Right. That's the minimum they have to be paid by their employer.
But obviously, they're making most of their money from tips. So how does that all work?
Well, there's something called a tip credit.
Okay, what's that?
It basically means that the tips an employee earns are supposed to bump their earnings up to at least the federal minimum wage.
Which is $7.25 an hour.
Exactly. But here's the thing. If the tips don't make up that difference, the employer is legally obligated to cover the shortfall.
Ah, so it's not as simple as just paying that lower base rate and assuming the tips will take care of the rest.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah.
Employers have to be actively monitoring things and making sure their tipped employees are actually hitting that minimum wage.
Wow. Sounds like there's a lot for employers to keep track of.
There is, and that's not even all of it. The article goes into how tip pooling works and why service charges are different from tips. And of course, you've got to keep accurate records for every single tip received.
So this is definitely an area where having expert guidance could be really helpful.
Oh, for sure. Especially for businesses that are new to dealing with tipped employees.
It seems like we're wading into some pretty deep water here, even for seasoned business owners. This stuff can feel overwhelming.
You're telling me. And we haven't even touched on things like E-Verify and new hire reporting.
Oh, right. Those are important too. Okay, so let's talk about E-Verify first. It's not mandatory for private businesses here in Texas, but the article definitely recommends it.
It's a really valuable tool. It helps you verify the employment eligibility of your new hires.
So you can make sure they're authorized to work in the U.S.
Exactly. It's an online system. It compares the info from the employee's Form I-9 with data from the Department of Homeland Security and the Social Security Administration.
Makes sense. And what about new hire reporting?
So in Texas, all employers have to report new hires to the Attorney General's office within 20 days of their start date.
Okay, and what's the purpose of that?
It helps with things like child support enforcement and tracking down people who owe money to the state.
Got it. So it's kind of like another layer of accountability.
Exactly.
It's clear that staying on top of Texas payday law can feel like a full-time job in itself. And that's before you even get to the actual work of running your business.
I hear you. It's a lot. And that's exactly why firms like the Unit Consulting are so important.
They're like that dedicated HR department you might not be able to afford, right?
That's a great way to put it. They handle all the nitty-gritty of staying compliant, so you can focus on what you do best. Running your business.
And I love that they go beyond just ticking the boxes. They actually offer things like payroll management, compliance audits, and tailored HR support.
Oh, yeah. They're not just about checking off a list. They really dive deep to understand your business and its unique needs.
That's so important. It's not one size fits all when it comes to HR.
Nope, not at all.
So you're getting expertise and peace of mind, all without the overhead of a full HR department.
It's like having a whole team of HR pros on call, ready to answer your questions and help you avoid those costly legal mistakes.
That's a great feeling. And remember, all of this fantastic info we've been talking about comes straight from the experts at the Unit Consulting. So if you're listening and anything we've said has sparked a question, or if you're feeling even a little bit unsure about your own practices, I highly recommend reaching out to them.
Absolutely. They offer a free consultation so you can discuss your specific concerns and learn how they can help. Their number is 956-230-6866.
They're ready and waiting to offer that tailored support to keep your business on the right side of the law.
Couldn't agree more.
You know, even if you think your payroll setup is perfect, sometimes it's worth getting a second opinion, just for that extra peace of mind.
It's like a checkup for your business. A little preventative care goes a long way.
Exactly. And when it comes to payroll, you really don't want to mess around.
Nope, the stakes are too high.
So, before we dive even deeper into some real-world examples, let's take a moment to reflect. What's standing out to you so far? What questions or concerns do you have about Texas payday law? We'll be right back to break it all down even further after a quick break. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the ins and outs of Texas payday law, but one thing that really sticks out to me is how important it is to be proactive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's tempting to put HR stuff on the back burner, when you're busy running a business and all.
There's always a million things to do.
But honestly, taking the time to understand the law and set up good payroll practices early on, it's like preventative medicine for your business.
I love that analogy, preventative medicine.
Yeah, because if you don't take care of things now, you could end up with a major headache later.
A headache in the form of legal trouble, fines, all that fun stuff.
Exactly, and nobody wants to deal with that.
And that's where I think expert guidance can really make a difference. Like the article from the Unit Consulting, they really emphasize that.
They're the pros. They know all the ins and outs of Texas payday law, and they work with businesses of all sizes.
What I find interesting about their approach is that they don't just offer like a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. They tailor their advice to each individual business.
Exactly, because every business is unique. What works for a construction company with 50 employees might not work for a restaurant with 10.
Exactly. And the unit consulting understands that.
It's not just about staying compliant with the law either. When you're handling payroll correctly, it actually creates a better work environment.
Oh, absolutely. When employees know they're being paid fairly and on time, it builds trust and respect.
And that leads to happier employees.
Exactly. Happier employees are more productive, and they're less likely to leave the company.
So it's a win-win for everyone.
It really is.
And that's where I think the unit consulting really shines. They help you create that positive work environment while also making sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your lates legally.
They're like an extension of your team, there to guide you every step of the way.
So if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, maybe I should take a closer look at my payroll practices, I highly recommend reaching out to the unit consulting.
They offer a free consultation, so you can talk through your specific concerns and see how they can help.
Their number is 956-230-6866. Don't wait until there's a problem. Being proactive is always the best approach.
Couldn't agree more.
You know, it's easy to get complacent
Mm-hmm.
and think, oh, my payroll is fine. I don't need any help.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
But sometimes an outside perspective can be so valuable.
It really can. You might not even realize there are areas where you could be doing things better.
Or more efficiently. It's like getting a second opinion from a doctor.
Sometimes that's all it takes to catch something early on.
And when it comes to payroll, it's better to be safe than sorry.
No doubt about it.
So what are the things business owners can do to be more proactive?
Well, the first thing is to educate yourself. The Texas Workforce Commission website is a great resource.
They've got tons of information on there.
Fact sheets, FAQs, sample forms, you name it.
It's definitely worth checking out.
And of course, you can always reach out to an HR professional.
Like the folks at the unit consulting.
They're happy to answer any questions you have.
Another important step is documentation.
Make sure you're keeping clear and accurate records of everything related to payroll.
Employee info, wages, hours worked, deductions, all of it.
Everything.
Those records are your best friend if a dispute ever arises.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They can prove that you've been acting in good faith and following the law.
And don't just file those records away and forget about them.
Right. Review them regularly. Maybe even have someone else take a look, just to double check for any errors.
Catching those early can save you a lot of hassle later.
Exactly.
And finally, don't underestimate the power of communication.
oh, that's huge.
Be transparent with your employees.
Make sure they understand their pay rates, how their pay is calculated, when they'll be paid, all of that good stuff.
Clear communication can prevent a lot of misunderstandings and disputes.
It really can.
It's all about creating that culture of respect and transparency.
Absolutely.
Well said. So I think we've covered a lot of really important ground here. But let's move beyond the theory now and look at some real-world scenarios. We'll explore some case studies and answer your questions after a quick break. Okay, so we've spent a good chunk of time unpacking Texas payday law, and I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that proactive HR management, it's not just a nice to have.
Oh, it's definitely essential.
It's like, setting yourself up for success from the get-go.
Exactly. And avoiding potential problems down the road.
So if we're talking about being proactive, what are some practical steps business owners can take right now?
All right, so step one, educate yourself. Don't just assume you know how it all works. Go straight to the source.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
The Texas Workforce Commission website. It's like a treasure trove of information.
I heard it's pretty comprehensive.
Oh, it is. They've got fact sheets, FAQs, even sample forms you can use.
So everything you need to get started.
Pretty much. And of course, don't be afraid to reach out for help.
Right, like if you got a specific question or just need some clarification.
Exactly.
I mean, we've been talking about this great article from the unit consulting. They're the experts.
They are, and they offer free consultations.
So there's really no excuse not to reach out.
Nope. They can help you figure out if you're on the right track or if there are any areas where you need to make some adjustments.
It's like getting a second opinion, but for your business.
Exactly.
So education and expert guidance, those are key.
For sure.
What else should business owners keep in mind?
Documentation.
Ah, yes.
Keep detailed records of everything related to payroll, employee information, wages, hours worked, deductions, the whole 9 yards.
Because if a dispute does come up, those records are your best defense.
They're like your proof. that
Right.
you've been doing things by the book.
And it's not enough to just have those records.
Right. You need to review them regularly, make sure they're accurate and up to date.
Maybe even have someone else look them over.
A fresh set of eyes can catch things you might miss.
It's all about being thorough and proactive.
Exactly.
And speaking of proactive, don't forget about communication.
Oh, that's so important.
Clear communication with your employees.
Make sure they understand how their pay works, when they'll be paid, any relevant policies, all that good stuff.
It can prevent so many headaches down the line.
Oh, absolutely. When everyone's on the same page, it just makes things run smoother.
It's all about creating that culture of transparency and respect.
Couldn't agree more.
So, as we wrap things up here, what are the key things you want our listeners to remember?
Okay, so first, take the time to educate yourself about Texas payday law. Don't just wing it.
Right, knowledge is power.
Exactly. Second, if you need help, don't be afraid to ask for it. There are experts out there, like the unit consulting, who can guide you through the process.
They're a great resource.
And third, document everything. Keep those records organized and up to date.
And finally, communicate clearly with your employees.
Make sure everyone understands how things work.
It's the best way to avoid misunderstandings and disputes.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on our deep dive into Texas payday law. I hope you found this information helpful. And remember, taking care of your HR and payroll, it's not just about avoiding legal trouble.
It's about creating a fair and positive work environment for everyone.
And that's something we can all get behind. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.